On the 26th of May, 1828, a pale teenage boy staggered into Unschlitt Square in Nuremberg. He would vomit if coffee or beer was in the same room, and the mere smell of wine made him drunk. Strangest of all was his ability to read in complete darkness. He would reveal his name to be Kaspar Hauser. The story of Kaspar Hauser would later become immortalised in film and television. But Kaspar's life would ultimately end in a tragedy as mysterious as his life was. Join us as we explore the tragic mystery of Kaspar Hauser. At around 5 in the afternoon, a local cobbler, George Weekman, observed a tired, bedraggled teenage boy stagger into Unschlitt Square in Nuremberg. As he approached the boy to see if he was okay, he noticed that he walked in a strange, stilted manner, as if his limbs were unusually stiff. The boy held out an envelope, but before Weekman could take it, the boy collapsed into his arms. The letter would be addressed to the captain of the 4th Squadron, 6th Cavalry Regiment. This would prove to be the start of one of the greatest mysteries of the 19th century. Weekman took the boy to Captain Wessenig, captain of the 4th Squadron, 6th Cavalry Regiment, as the letter requested. He tried asking the boy questions on the way, but the boy only responded with confused mumbles. Wessenig observed the boy seemingly fascinated with a candle, as if he'd never seen one before. The boy reached forwards and put his hand in the flame and released a scream of pain and surprise. When he offered him beer and meat, the boy stared at it, as if unsure what to do, but he ravenously ate black bread and water. Captain Wessenig was asking the boy where he came from, but the boy continued to reply with "I don't know." When he looked down and noticed the creased and sweat-stained envelopes the boy had been carrying now on the table. The envelope contained 2 letters. The first letter explained that the sender was a poor labourer who had children of their own to raise, and that they had sent the boy to the captain as he wanted to serve in the army. It ended on the sinister note stating that since they adopted the boy from their mother 16 years earlier, they never let him go outside the house. The second letter read that the sender was too poor to look after the boy, and that his father, now dead, had served in the 6th Cavalry Regiment. It included the boy's date of birth, the 30th of April 1816, which would make the boy 16, and significantly, the boy's first name, Kaspar, although the recipient was advised they would need to choose a surname for the boy. The second letter seemed to suggest it was from the boy's biological parents, and was addressed to the person to whom they had chosen to take over the care for their child. The captain reasoned that Kaspar was in no condition, physically or mentally, to join the army, so he handed him in at the local police station. When in the police station, he wrote down his full name on a piece of paper: Kaspar Hauser. On the face of it, it was simple enough. An illegitimate child with learning difficulties left on someone's doorstep who was raised until they turned 16. But there was something about the whole situation that made the police uneasy. His feet were tender and bleeding through his shoes, as if he wasn't used to walking, and his skin had the pallor of someone who had been confined to darkness for most of their lives. Additionally, the boy only repeated, "I don't know," "horse," and "I want to be a cavalryman as my father was," and this was all he could say. It was like he was not only coached to repeat these words over and over, but that these were the only words he was ever taught. He called every animal a horse, and when he saw actual horses, he looked upon them with an intense fascination that clearly showed he had never seen a horse before. When the police examined the letters, their suspicions were only heightened when they noticed they were written in the same hand. In other words, the letters were written by the same person at the same time, but they were written in a way to fabricate a narrative of an abandoned child being raised by a kindly stranger. The police had no idea what to do with the mysterious boy, so Kaspar was locked in a jail cell until they could decide what to do next. Kaspar's behaviour when behind bars only raised more questions. He would happily sit for hours without moving. It was as if he had no concept of time. It wasn't long until he became a local celebrity, and crowds of curious and bemused locals flocked to see the mysterious Kaspar Hauser. One local gave him a toy that he dressed in ribbons and pretended to feed at every meal, like a young child playing with their dolls. He seemed completely unconcerned with being the centre of attention and would defecate and urinate in front of the crowds without a second thought, much to the amusement and disgust of onlookers. One of the most mysterious aspects of Kaspar was his finely tuned, almost superhuman senses. He found the smell of coffee or beer so overwhelming that he would throw up, and the sight and smell of meat made him nauseous. Just the smell of wine could make him drunk. His hearing and eyesight were so refined that he could read in the dark. He would later demonstrate this ability by reading from a Bible in a blacked out room. Even more inexplicable was his sensitivity to magnetism and metals. He could tell whether the north or south pole of a magnet was pointed towards him, and he could distinguish between metals just by passing his hand over them, even when they were hidden by a cloth. When Kaspar was first introduced to the people of Nuremberg, the assumption was that he had severe learning difficulties, or was suffering from a mental disability of some kind. His early behaviour more resembled that of an animal, in terms of how he ate, his public defecation, and his fear of loud noises like thunder. But as time went by, Kaspar showed an uncanny ability to learn from those visiting him, and before long he was using scissors, quills and matches. His vocabulary increased by the day, and as he grew in intelligence and refinement, his facial features steadily changed. Soon, Kaspar was able to tell his own story, but this only deepened the mystery. For as long as Kaspar could remember, he was kept prisoner in a small room, about 7 feet long and 4 feet wide. There were windows, but these were boarded up, and the ceiling was so low that it was impossible for him to stand up. His bed was a bundle of straw on the ground. He never saw anyone the whole time he was there, but when he woke up, there would be bread and water waiting for him. Sometimes the water had an unpleasant, bitter taste. After drinking it, he would fall asleep, and when he woke, his straw bed would have been made and his hair and nails cut. All he had for toys was 3 wooden horses. Then one day, a man started to come to his room and taught him the phrases, "I don't know," "horses," and "I want to be a cavalryman as my father was." He also taught him how to write his own name. He hadn't escaped, but rather he woke to find himself dressed, and the man who had taught him the phrases led him outside and took him near the gates of Nuremberg. The man had promised Kaspar a big live horse when he became a soldier. But at some point, the man had abandoned him, and Kaspar found his way into Nuremberg, where he would be found staggering around by the cobbler. His story caused a sensation, and he became a national celebrity overnight. In dining rooms all over Germany, the only topic of conversation was the enigmatic Kaspar Hauser. It was decided by the burgomaster which is similar to a town mayor, and the town council to take Kaspar into their care and protection. He was even appointed a guardian, a lecturer and scientist named George Friedrich Daumer. It would be Daumer who discovered Kaspar's sensitivity to magnetism and his ability to read in the dark. By now Kaspar had developed into a teenager of normal intelligence. In the meantime, the clamour to unravel the mystery of where Kaspar Hauser came from intensified. Some even went as far as to claim that Kaspar must be of royal blood and was hidden away due to being an illegitimate heir of some kind. The town paid for thousands of posters appealing for clues about his identity and even offered a reward. The police combed the countryside for his place of imprisonment, but nothing was ever found. Shortly after receiving nationwide attention, Kaspar received the first attempt on his life. He was found lying on the floor of Daumer's cellar, bleeding from his head, with his shirt torn. He told police that he'd been attacked by a man wearing a silk mask, who told him, "You have to die before you leave the city of Nuremberg." He then struck him with either a knife or a club. Kaspar said he recognised the speaker as the man who had brought him to Nuremberg. The police searched Nuremberg, but were unable to find his assailant. With his life now in danger, he moved to a new address, with a new guardian and 2 policemen to protect him. He slipped from the public eye, but he wasn't forgotten. Kaspar's novelty had worn off, and now the people of Nuremberg were beginning to object to their taxes being used to fund his life and protection. The first murmuring of discontent came shortly after Kaspar was attacked, with some saying he had done it to himself for attention. After a brief tour of Europe with Englishman Lord Stanhope, Kaspar found himself back in Germany, in the town of Ansbach, under the care of Stanhope's friend Dr. Mayer, and being guarded by Captain Hickel. Kaspar desperately missed Nuremberg, but aside from a brief visit to the town, he would never get the chance to fully return to his adoptive home. On the 14th of December 1833, Kaspar staggered into Mayer's house saying, "Man stabbed, knife, Hofgarten, gave purse, go quickly." A doctor was called who confirmed that the knife had punctured his lung and liver. In the meantime, Captain Hickel rushed to the park to where Kaspar had been walking and found the silk purse. Contained within the purse was a note that read, "Hauser will be able to tell you how I look, whence I came from, and who I am. To spare him from that task, I will tell you myself. I am from, on the Bavarian border, on the river. My name is M.L.O. The note left the locations of where the man claimed to be from intentionally blank. Kaspar explained that he received a message from a labourer to go to the Hofgarten. When he arrived, he was approached by a tall man with whiskers, wearing a black cloak, who asked him, "Are you Kaspar Hauser?" He confirmed that he was, and the man handed him the purse. The man stabbed him as soon as he took the purse, then ran off. Captain Hickel would cast doubt on Kaspar's story when he stated that there were only one set of footprints in the snow, the implication being that Kaspar stabbed himself. Kaspar would die 2 days later, his last words being, "I didn't do this to myself." So how do we explain the mystery of Kaspar Hauser? Although some claim he was the illegitimate child to either royalty or an heir to a rich estate, there is no evidence of this, and some critics argue that someone with that level of wealth and power would have more effective and efficient means of hiding illegitimate children than to keep them captive only to release them when they turned 16. The release of Kaspar Hauser is the most perplexing part of the story. Where did he come from? Why was he released at 16? And what was the reasoning behind the location he was released? Some skeptics claim that Kaspar was suffering from a personality disorder that caused him to invent the story of being held captive, and that if he was truly held captive like that from early childhood, he would never have developed the intellect he seemed to acquire following exposure to people. This, however, doesn't explain his physical appearance. His seemingly superhuman senses, such as being able to read in the dark, and his sensitivity to magnetism and being able to detect different metals even when hidden behind a cloth. And it doesn't explain where Kaspar came from or who he was. The debate around the death of Kaspar continues to rage. Some say that Kaspar had only intended to cause himself a minor injury, but had accidentally injured himself more seriously than planned. By the time the second and fatal attack occurred, his fame was in decline, as shown by the failure of his recently released autobiography. People theorised that the second attack was Kaspar's desperate attempt at staying in the public eye and retaining his celebrity. It's important to note, however, that these theories are based on Captain Hickle's account of there only being a single set of footprints where Kaspar was stabbed. And as Captain Hickle was tasked with protecting the boy, he certainly had a motive to create a narrative to make it look like Kaspar had stabbed himself, rather than inviting blame for the death of the person he was meant to be protecting. A study in 2005 does little to answer the question, stating that it's unlikely that the stab to the chest was inflicted exclusively for the purpose of self-damage, but neither a suicidal nor homicidal act can be ruled out. Interestingly, there are no other accounts that can verify or dispute Captain Hickle's account of there being a single set of footprints. Others point to the note found in the purse as being evidence of the wound being self-inflicted, stating that the note contained grammatical and spelling errors typical of Kaspar. Although the handwriting didn't match Kaspar's, skeptics argue that Kaspar could have written the note with his left hand. The mystery around who or what Kaspar Hauser was, where he came from and who killed him, is likely to remain unexplained. If you enjoyed this episode, please remember to like, share and subscribe. It makes such a difference to small channels like these. And if you made it this far, thank you very much for listening.